My name is Daniel. I'm a director at the World Resources Institute and the founder of Cool Food. Now, anyone who's living on this planet right now knows that we're going through some pretty epic challenges, be that the global pandemic, the reckoning on equity and race, and the fires and storms that are reminding us every day that climate change is now real and it's now happening. But the next hour and a bit, we're not going to focus on the dark. We're going to focus on the light. We're going to talk about what's possible, what's positive, and what's upbeat. Because within the Cool Food team, we believe that to make the world a better, more sustainable place, we need to throw a better party than those destroying it. And so in that spirit, what we've done is we've pulled together for you a really great agenda, an agenda that's going to share some new exciting announcements and also bring to life the world of delicious climate eating through some fantastic stories. So we're going to start. I'm going to just talk you through what Cool Food is and share some announcements. We're then going to hand over to our friend Sarah at Panera, who's going to talk about the great work that they're doing and also a new partnership we have together. We're then going to hand over to Jenny, who's going to lead us through a fantastic panel called Worthy to Wonderful, exploring how this world of plant-based food is going through an exciting transformation. And then we're going to end with some great insights from Santana at UC Davis Health, who's going to talk about how the world of plant-based eating is coming to life in a healthcare setting. Now, when I talk to my friends about climate and food, they often say to me, well, why are you sticking those two things together? Isn't climate change about just changing the energy that we use and the types of transport that we have? Well, yeah, they're important, but actually, it's also really critical that we change food and agriculture as well, because food and agriculture actually accounts for about a quarter of the world's global greenhouse gas emissions and is the #1 driver of deforestation in the world. So if we're going to really move forward on climate change, it's critical that we also improve the food system as well. Now, at the World Resources Institute, WRI, we've done research over the last 5 or 6 years looking at, well, what are all the different solutions that can be used to help improve the environment and help reduce the climate impact of food. And one of the most interesting and one of the largest that we've identified is shifting diets. It's changing the different types of food that we all choose to eat. Now, the reason that this is important is because different foods, it turns out, have different impacts on the climate. So this chart here just shows the greenhouse gas emissions, so that's the climate impact, per gram of protein from these different sources of foods. And what you can see is on the far right-hand side, there's beef and lamb, what's known as ruminant meat. They have a very high greenhouse gas emissions per gram of protein compared to other forms of animal protein, but especially compared to that of plants. So if we were to adapt our diets to have less meat, especially beef and lamb, but more plants, we know that actually it will help make a big difference to the climate. Now, this isn't all about, eating vegan and vegetarian food. For us, it's about having a plant-rich diet, having a plant-rich lifestyle. So that's just less meat, less beef, and more plants. And what's super exciting is that through some of the modeling we've done at WRI, we know that actually, if we're able to halve the amount of meat that's eaten in high meat eating nations, there's an amazing possibility. We could actually save about 3 to 5 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions, which is a huge amount. And also we could feed 10 billion people by 2050 without driving any more deforestation, without clearing any more forest. So it's an amazing possibility just by shifting what we can eat. However, there are a couple of barriers that we found to making this happen. The first one is that very few of the public understand this connection between climate and food, and even less understand that shifting towards a more plant-rich diet is a solution. And the second barrier that we've identified is that even if people know, if we walk into a dining environment or if we walk into a shop that has meat front and center, it's very easy for people to choose that rather than plants, which sometimes can just be a side vegetable or hidden at the back of the store. And so at Cool Food, what we've done is we've established two elements of our program that's really working to try and tackle these barriers. The first is the Cool Food Pledge, and the second is the Cool Food Meals. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly explain what these programs are about and share some information about them. So on Cool Food Pledge is basically our program that really helps resolve that second issue of dining environments being ones that aren't set up for success. And so what Cool Food Pledge does is it helps dining facilities from hotels and restaurants to universities, schools, hospitals, or workplace cafeterias cut their food-related greenhouse gas emissions through shifting towards more plants. And basically, we do this through helping organizations do three simple steps. The first is we help an organization commit to a science-based target of cutting their food-related emissions by 25% by 2030. And basically, what we do is we get, say, a restaurant chain to send us their food procurement data, so the food that they buy. We then take that and using a calculator and a methodology that we've established, we turn that into greenhouse gas emissions. So in this example here, a fictional restaurant chain serves 279 pounds of food, which we then have determined is 651 million pounds of CO2. And you can see that through this, we begin to identify which are the biggest parts, biggest ingredients driving the most emissions. This becomes the base year, and then from that, we then look to reduce those emissions by a couple of percent each year to get us in line with cutting it by a quarter by 2030. The second thing we then do, though, is to help organizations create plans for driving change. At WRI, we have a program called the Better Buying Lab that is a team of behavioral scientists that's basically been researching how do we get consumers to choose plant-based food. And so over the last number of years, we've read about 4,000 papers, interviewed 70 experts and done 30 different online and field experiments. And from that, we've determined that there's actually about 20 different strategies that can be really effective at changing consumers' eating habits. And so we use those insights to help create plans for change. And the third step that we do with members of the Cool Food Pledge is we then help promote their pioneering work and also engage their diners. So that's what Cool Food's about. And we announced it in 2018, and we announced some new organizations joining last year. This here is a range of them. You can see big restaurant groups like IKEA, Hilton, universities like Harvard, a series of different medical centers and cities like Milan and Ghent. And over the last 6 or so months, we've been gathering data for how this group has been achieving results that they've achieved in the first year of the Cool Food Pledge. And what we're really pleased to announce is that in the first year, we've actually been able to reduce absolute emissions by about 3% from the food that they serve. And when we take in and we factor in the growth in the food that they serve, it's actually a relative reduction of 6% per calorie. Now, this is actually ahead of where we want to be. So it's our target is 2 to 4%. So we're already starting to see results from this work. But what's really cool is now we're beginning to dig into the data and see, well, what's driving this? And what you can see is that actually this is indeed because we're reducing beef and lamb and red meat sales. We're keeping other forms of meat consumption flat, but we're increasing the amount of plant-based sales. So that kind of theory of shifting what we do, we all eat, impacting the climate is coming through already in the results. And the other really cool thing that's emerging is some examples of leadership through organisations that are part of Cool Food, one of which is the City of Milan. Now, the City of Milan actually buys a lot of food every year to serve to its citizens in the town hall, hospitals, healthcare, and also schools. And in fact, they serve about 17 million meals to students each year. And back in 2015, they decided that they wanted to shift towards serving more sustainable and healthy food. And so over the years, they've implemented a series of changes at schools to shift towards more healthy and sustainable offerings. They've done loads of things, but three that kind of jump out to me is they've taken the iconic Italian pasta sauce, ragu, beef and tomatoes. And they've actually switched the beef for soy, first using this alternative recipe in pasta. And then last year, actually also transitioning the iconic Italian dish, lasagna, to being plant-based. They also replaced the twice weekly beef stew with that of turkey stew or omelette, and also increased the vegetable offering as well. And what's really great is that through this work, they've actually been able to reduce beef and lamb consumption and increase the amount of plants. And this is translated to a 20% fall in greenhouse gas emissions, or 18% relative to volume. So, considering we need a reduction by 25% by 2030, this is pretty outstanding results just in a couple of years' work. So we're beginning to see some great work with our current members, but we're also pleased to announce today that we've got a suite of new members joining as well. So a couple of new cities. So welcome Toronto and the City of Copenhagen to Cool Food Pledge. Some iconic British restaurant chains, Harvester and Browns. We've also got Nestle joining in the capacity of serving food to their employees. They serve about 50 million meals a year, actually. And then we've also got NYU and the University of Cambridge. And NYU, it's not only their campus in Manhattan, but also their campus in the Middle East as well. So across the Cool Food Pledge, we're beginning to really see great results, and those results are starting to scale into significant impact. And sorry, the slide jump. That collection of organisation now equates to 940 million meals, which, if we continue our progression of reducing emissions, will take about 1 million tonnes of CO2 emissions out of the atmosphere every year, and will be which is equivalent of about 700,000 EU cars, and would save about 30,000 hectares of land. So that's the Cool Food Pledge. But now let me also just share with you what we're doing in terms of the consumers and engaging them through the work in Cool Food Meals. So as I mentioned earlier, not that many people know about the climate impact of food and don't know that just by choosing more plants, they can make a real difference. Now, clearly, one way we can resolve this is by sitting people down and giving them all the facts and figures about what is the impact and the need to change. But we know that just giving people information can be rather dull, and it doesn't really stick. What we really need to do is make it much more engaging and interesting. And in addition, what we need to do is make it simple. One of the things about this space is telling people about the climate impact of different food types can be quite confusing. So, for example, some emerging work like labeling the greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of food, and that is now becoming a carbon footprint on certain packs. And while it's great to get consumers this kind of information, it's arguably quite confusing to most folk and hard to understand what to do. So we know that to really kind of engage consumers, what we need to do is make this simple, make this uplifting, and make people feel that they're joining a growing movement that will achieve collective impact. And so what we've actually been kind of hatching away over the last couple of months is an innovative new methodology that will really help companies determine and then badge which meals are better for the climate. Now, I'm just going to share with you a couple of geeky slides from it, just to kind of dig into the detail on this. But basically, what we figured out is what is the recommended daily carbon footprint that each person needs to have for their diet by 2030 if we're going to hit the climate target, which is about 38% smaller than the current average. And what we've done is we've taken that amount, that carbon footprint daily allowance, and we've divided it across meals in a day. So 20% for breakfast, 30% for lunch, 30% for dinner, and the rest for in between meal snacks and also drinks. And this gives us a threshold for what we need meals greenhouse gas emissions to be like by 2030. So in the US, it's about 3.6 kilograms for a breakfast of CO2 emissions equivalent, and for dinners, it's 5.38 kilograms. And what we then do is using that threshold, we then take a restaurant chain's menu items, look at the ingredients list and calculate the carbon footprint of that dish. And if that dish falls below the thresholds that I just talked about and also meets some nutritional standards we say that it's a cool food meal. And if it's a cool food meal, what we then do is we provide this badge that can go on menus, can go on food items, that simply and clearly indicates to a consumer that it's the kind of food that we should all be eating if we want to make a difference to the climate. So it's simple. But also what we hope that we're doing with this is making it widely available. So we're very pleased to announce that Panera, the large restaurant chain across the US, is going to be the first organization using the Cool Food Meal Badge. And Sarah will be talking about how they're going to be bringing this to life shortly. But what will be happening is this badge will start to appeal on menu items, on products, and start to be seen. But also what we're trying to do with this is make it uplifting, engaging, and fun. And so all of the brand positioning, the logo, the whole movement will be celebrating success and trying to make people smile. But we'll also be working to make people feel that they're part of a collective effort. So through our social media channels that we're establishing and we've just launched today, we're going to start a conversation about what's happening, and we're going to make people realize that this isn't just one or two people starting to make a change. It's actually many people. And that actually, if both organizations serving food and consumers eating food can begin to make the right choices, then actually we are indeed on track to have a better world that we're achieving through a better party. So thank you very much. That's just a little overview of everything that we're doing on Cool Food and the announcement of Cool Food Meals. But now let me turn towards Sarah at Panera, who's going to share the work that they're doing on sustainable eating and how they're bringing this to life through the Cool Food Meals pledge, Cool Food Meals. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Daniel, very much. And Daniel, are you going to be displaying my slides? All right, perfect. Thank you so much. I will try to keep the party going here and not get to Daniel's earlier point, too nerdy. But we're very excited to be here today. We're very excited to talk about our Impact of the Plate work and our partnership with WRI and the Cool Food team. Next, just to give you, next slide, please. There we go. We're very, just to give you a little bit of a reference point of who Panera is, because I recognize we have a global audience today. Panera, we are a bakery cafe. We serve soup, salad, sandwiches. We have over 2,000 bakery cafes located in the US and Canada. We also run 19 of our own commissary locations that make our fresh dough every single day. And we have about 140,000 associates nationwide. And really, as an organization, we've always been focused since the beginning on serving food that's good and good for you. And for us, what that really means is food that's absolutely delicious, but that also you feel good about eating. When you leave the cafe, you feel better than when you walked in. Next. And the question that we asked ourselves a little more than a year ago was, how do we take this really overwhelming problem of global warming and climate change and actually bring it down to the plate level. Because in all honesty, and as Daniel started to describe a little bit at the beginning of his presentation, this is an overwhelming problem, and it's going to take collective impact to actually make a difference. It's not just about what Panera does, and it's not just about what any of the Cool Food Pledge companies do. It's actually about how do we join together and actually simplify this so that we can all take action together. Next. And for most of us as well, as a sustainability professional myself, I also wanted to take action. I wanted to stop hiding away some of this information in CSR reports, which are really great, but not very many people read them, and consumers don't get engaged around some of that content. So we knew that we had to actually really make this actionable. And that's why we thought we really focused on kind of what is that true impact of the plate. Because what's right in front of me, that's what I can act on. That's the decision I can make at each and every meal. And so that really inspired us as we went and partnered with WRI and continued the work that we had started with Better Buying Lab, and it morphed into this project. But to really start on this journey, we had to look at ourselves. Next slide, please. And for that, we had to look at our own carbon footprint, which we do constantly, year over year as part of, again, our CSR process and our other commitments around climate. But we had to take a hard look and say, where is our biggest impact? And not only, to Daniel's point, is there 25% of the global greenhouse gases come from food and agriculture production, but we also know that actually over half of our greenhouse gas footprint comes from food itself and what we choose to put on the plate and serve to our guests. So we started by looking really deeply at ourselves, but then also thinking about taking that problem and how do we make it actionable. Next. And in order to do that, we looked at WRI's research and said, what is actually the key drivers for us? What are the levers that we can pull within our organization to help drive? And we knew that shifting diets is the #1 thing that we can do. And that's the focus, again, of all the Cool Food work. Next. So then we decided to break down our pantry and continue to take that greenhouse gas impact and continue to break it down further and further and further. First, we started off by breaking down our pantry and say, where really is our impact? And of course, meat and eggs is certainly a large one. And for us, bakery. We are a bakery. We have bakers in every single baker cafe every night, baking bread. So a lot of impact in flour and grain as well. We looked at that, but then we needed to say that we had to translate that one level down if we really want to get to the plate. It's not just about what's in our pantry, but it's also about what are we putting on the plate each and every day, and what's the balance of those ingredients. And in partnership with WRI, next, we actually broke down each and every single recipe we have for all of our entrees on our menu. And what we found was that 55% of our entrees actually fit within the Cool Foods meal guidelines. And we literally, methodically, with the WRI team and our friends at Blue House Consulting and Pure Strategies, went through and measured the impact of each individual ingredient. So how many ounces of chicken am I using on this recipe? How many ounces of dairy? How much quinoa and whole grain rice am I using? We broke that down for each and every one, and we were pleasantly surprised by the results. And we were able to then actually put this in action and get this in front of guests. And that's next. So taking that information and taking what we've learned about these entrees, not only is that informing kind of our food work long term, but we knew that we had an opportunity to start to engage consumers and to start to really have an educational campaign that wasn't just about Panera, but it was actually around the issue at hand. So today we've gone live with 3 components of our campaign. One is menu description badging, so using this Cool Food Meal badge on our menu itself through our app as well as all of our digital properties. Second is a social media campaign mirroring all the messaging that WRI is having of how can you have an impact when you make a food choice. And then lastly, engaging our own best consumers. So we have a loyalty base of 40 million My Panera members, and we'll be talking to them through messaging. But this is just the start of our journey. We have much more to do. Next. Oh, I missed a slide, but that's okay. So the next steps on our journey are a couple things. One is actually engaging our consumer post-purchase and actually trying to help them understand kind of the impact of their plate after their purchase with an additional email and messaging around that. So they can feel positive about that choice. They can get in on the party and get excited. The second piece is more educational campaigns that'll be coming out next year. And then lastly is collaboration with WRI and new partners. This is a certification where, again, Panera is just the first member, and it is going to take a collective impact of all brands joining in on this to really make a difference. And we're excited to partner with WRI to do just that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Daniel.
Thanks, Sarah. That's excellent. And it's just so exciting to see this all come to life and see how you've worked from the impacts that you're having all the way through to actually the changes that are happening that the consumer is seeing, and considering your scale, how much of an impact that's not only going to have on individual choices, but how we're going to start shaping the conversation together. So thank you very much, and thank you for your ongoing leadership. So now I'd just like to hand over to Jenny. Just if we can go to the next slide, please. Jenny is a great friend of WRI and is a US-based writer and contributor, focusing on food, agriculture, climate, and technology. So 4 of my 4 favorite things. And Jenny not only is clearly writes for Forbes, but many other titles such as The Observer, Washington Post, New York Magazine, etc. And also, after doing a little bit of YouTubing, I understand is an emerging stand-up comedian as well, which I was pleased to learn. So Jenny, over to you. You're going to lead us in a panel about From Worthy to Wonderful.
Wow, thank you, Daniel. Thank you for that flashback to my long retired live storytelling career, but well, great. I want to tell you guys a little bit about the panel we're going to have today. So it's called Worthy to Wonderful, and we're talking about how sustainable diets are evolving into a delicious and exciting movement. So we're seeing climate-friendly food shift from worthy to wonderful, from drab to delicious, from predictable to innovative, and ultimately from a small group of eaters to the masses, kind of that big party that Daniel was talking about. So I'm going to sort of kick things off by talking about my favorite topic, which is the intersection of technology and deliciousness. So we all know that plant-based foods have come a long way. From the way the story often gets told, the only options that a vegetarian or vegan used to have was kind of this like dry black bean burger or a sad piece of bland tofu. But okay, let's be clear, that story is a myth. It's totally false. And I'm going to get back to that in a few minutes and tell you why. But for now, let's pretend it's true. Let's just sort of go along with that. Stay with me. So before 2009 and 2011, vegans are just like sadly moping through life with only bean burgers to cheer them up until Pat Brown of Impossible Foods and Ethan Brown of Beyond Meat, no relation, come along to make these new plant-based burgers that taste like beef but are actually made from plants. So Impossible was really actually a groundbreaker, especially in using technology to make plant-based burgers delicious. The way they did that was by reverse engineering kind of the traditional beef hamburger and discovering that the key to a burger's delicious taste was this specific molecule called heme. And then sort of using the scientific magic of genetic engineering, they replicated that molecule using plant-based ingredients, soy and genetically engineered yeast. So the heme not only bleeds like a burger, which gives you this aesthetic and sensory experience of beefy burger eating, but it also gives the Impossible patty its unique iron-rich beefy taste. So the success of these burgers kind of sparked this huge boom in plant-based food making focused on expert mimicry, where scientists and researchers did these deep dives into what gives a conventional protein its delicious taste, and then kind of like reverse engineering it and making it with plants. So in the case of Eat Just, what makes a good scrambled egg? And you can actually, I have read pages of documents on what makes an egg, gives it its taste, what makes it creamy, what makes it fluffy. It's the gelation, it's the humectedness and all these other terms. And they then recreated that delicious egg with mung beans. But we all know mimicry can only get you so far. Kind of the novelty factor of trying something new, whether it's a Popeye's fried chicken sandwich, or a Beyond Burger that tastes just like beef, it does capture the public's attention in the short term. But in order to keep those customers coming back for more, food makers, especially plant-based food makers, need to go beyond mimicry and make sure what they're selling, what they're making is truly delicious in its own right. And right now we're in a very exciting time indeed, because we're entering kind of a new era of plant-based deliciousness. And this isn't limited to the alt protein space. Plant scientists are also turning their attention to deliciousness now more than ever, as the world of plant breeding and gene editing goes kind of beyond the boring but very important traits like pest resistance, and instead goes towards making, well, not instead, but in addition, goes towards making plants like spicier tomatoes, grapes that taste like cotton candy, and even a whole new, more delicious breed of sesame plant, which is exactly what the company Sabra did when they formed a collaboration of scientists and plant breeders and sesame seed farmers and hummus tasters to create the perfect sesame crop for tahini, actually, in order to make a more delicious hummus. And another way we see innovation boosting taste has actually been here all along. And that's the way companies like Just and Beyond and Impossible and others are constantly putting out these new versions of their products that taste even better than the last ones by constantly kind of making these little tweaks to their recipes. In fact, just last week, Eat Just released a new version of their plant-based egg that is even creamier than the last version. And Beyond and Impossible are also always doing this, constantly putting out these sort of newer, tastier versions. And it happens when food scientists and chefs at these companies work in collaboration, really, to make these their plant-based creations taste even better. And sort of a new little secret to how this happens, there are new companies that now work just on plant-based ingredients. One is called Motif Foodworks that uses synthetic biology to make all sorts of ingredients that sort of offer these little improvements in lots of different ways, but especially taste. And now most of their stuff is top secret, actually, despite how many times I ask them. But some sort of general examples that they have shared with me are kind of like ingredients that can make a plant-based fat taste even more succulent, or create kind of a better texture for a plant-based meat and make it especially juicy and toothsome. The other new developments we're seeing are plant-based companies heading into entirely new taste terrain by making foods that previous vegan options couldn't quite mimic exactly, like cheese and bacon. Now, I know old school vegans are going to point me towards nutritional yeast and eggplant bacon, which I know one of our panelists makes pretty deliciously, and those are all great. But for a lot of kind of meat and dairy eaters, they want something more, and sometimes they want something ready-made. So enter At Last Foods in upstate New York. They're a really interesting blend of kind of nature and innovation, because the main ingredient in their plant-based food is actually just mushrooms. But instead of growing the mushrooms vertically, like you do traditionally, they grow them sort of horizontally in these long slabs that are then sliced like a cut of meat. So if we could pull up that slide. There you go. Looks exciting, doesn't it? Not yet, but they take those slabs and kind of slice them and marinate them, and they make them into actually just about anything, but their first product is, next slide, drum roll please. There we go. And I think if you peer closely, it actually sizzles, but is a bacon. And, you know, it cooks up and tastes just like bacon. It's pretty exciting. And so, yeah, they can use it for just about any kind of product, actually. And so they, in the sort of before times, they were doing these feasts of the future dinners where they were making all sorts of different foods with these mushrooms, including, if we can go to the next slide, this dessert crisp. But they also made foods like salmon and also a tagliatelle pasta. So the options are really limitless. Now, another company, Eclipse Foods in Berkeley, launched last year with an ice cream made from potatoes, which doesn't sound all that appetizing, I know, but I assure you it actually is delicious because I've tasted it. And that's because the key actually really isn't the potatoes, but the process itself that sort of the chef, food scientist, wizard, one of the co-founders of this company, Thomas Bowman, who used to be at Eat Just, it's the process that he kind of developed after playing with these ingredients and experimenting with them for hours until he could figure out how to replicate what are called sort of the casein micelles in dairy that give dairy its kind of lusciousness and creaminess. So right now what they've got on the market is ice cream. But what's really exciting, at least for me, is that they have some amazing, delicious cheese that they make. And I think that's coming sometime soon. But the great thing is that they could sort of take this plant-based, dairy-based and turn it into anything, and including really gourmet cheeses, by aging it in the same way you would milk. So it is a substitute, but it also can be transformed in these with traditional cheese making techniques, which makes it kind of this like nice blend of tradition and innovation. So now let's go back to the beginning and the myth that I started with, that what we had originally in vegan food options was just the sad bean burger. Of course, that's not really true. There have always been delicious vegan and vegetarian options from cuisines around the world available to you as a curious, sustainable eater. The key is some of these options didn't necessarily mimic the meat maybe you were familiar with. So let's take the example of Tofurkey. Stay with me. Now, you may know Tofurkey is kind of this sad little roast that some vegetarians used to have for Thanksgiving, made out of tofu, molded into a roast. But if you go even further back in Tofurkey's really interesting history, actually there's a great New Yorker article on this I encourage you all to read, but one of the founders of Tofurkey they all came together basically, the three founders, because one of the founders, Seth Tibbott, made this very delicious tempeh. And you know, he didn't set out to sort of mimic turkey, but he actually set out to make the most delicious tempeh that he possibly could. So he just spent hours and hours and days kind of experimenting with this. And what I think that story highlights is that the origins of experimentation and sustainable eating have always been in making delicious food. So now that these kind of mind-blowing substitutes like Impossible and Beyond have expanded the market and got all these omnivores on board and brought them to the table, the options are truly limitless. And I hope you get inspired to go kind of beyond the substitutes towards chasing deliciousness too. So yes, you can have a burger made from plants that tastes like beef, and an egg that tastes like a chicken egg but made from mung beans, and hummus made with sesame bread for creamy deliciousness, and bacon for mushrooms, and really good plant-based cheese. But you also have a new opportunity to start cooking with plants and legumes and mushrooms in new delicious ways that maybe you never explored before. So think of yourself as Seth Tibbott, way back when in the 70s, founder of Tofurkey, and be equal parts scientist, explorer, and chef. Somehow make that all work and start experimenting with your own delicious food. Now, I am going to introduce our panel with that. So we have Layla Kazim. She's a chef and food travel correspondent. And on her food blog, Cutlery Chronicles, she's been cataloging her global journey of discovery since 2012. She also has an amazing Instagram, so check that out. And she's part of the presenting team for BBC Radio 4's The Food Program, and a co-creator of Lonely Planet's The Ultimate Eat List, the world's top 500 food experience. And I want to introduce the next two, and then we'll go back to Layla. Max Lamanna. Max is an American chef and author of More Plants, Less Waste, which was recently voted the world's second most sustainable cookbook of 2020. On his Instagram, which is also quite amazing, he shows you how to prepare all sorts of dishes, including that eggplant bacon and carrot bacon I mentioned, in less than 1 minute. He is also a presenter on BBC Earth. Last but not least, Rob Marasco. Rob has spent 40 years in the food industry and the last 16 in a variety of roles at Sodexo, where he is now Senior Director of Culinary Development in North America, Sodexo North America. Rob leads Sodexo's culinary team focused on culinary development and menu performance. To date, he has led the creation of over 1,800 new recipes. That is a lot, and 150 new services for Sodexo in North America. So we are going to start off with Layla, who is going to show us sustainable inspiration from around the world. So take it away, Layla.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be able to speak to you all today. I am, over the next few minutes, hopefully going to provide some inspiration about the huge breadth of plant-based cuisines and dishes that are available across the world, you know, that go beyond your vegetable lasagna or your mushroom risotto. I've been lucky enough to travel quite a bit as part of my work and also leisure. And so I've been able to taste quite a lot of cuisines. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you through maybe some dishes and ingredients that might be a little bit less familiar than usual. And the first country I'm going to stop at, so we're going to make a visit to 4 countries today, is India. Now, India is such a huge country, and so it's got a vast range of regional cuisines, and plant-based eating there is often influenced by religious beliefs or what's affordable and available. Meat is often seen as an expensive luxury in the developing world. And so on our first slide, now this was a great meal, let me tell you. This is a picture of a thali, which I was served on a houseboat in Kerala, which is a tropical state in the south of India. And this meal was almost entirely plant-based, I think, apart from one dish. And a thali is a meal that's made up of various little dishes all together. And in the south of India, it's often served on a banana leaf, as it is here. And in this spread, there was sambar, which is like a lentil-based vegetable stew, okra cooked with garlic, onions with mustard oil, mixed vegetables, bitter gourd, cabbage, beetroot with curd, pineapple with curd, piping hot rice, and of course loads of poppadoms fresh from the fryer. And this was for 2 people, and let me tell you, we managed to clear it all, and it was no mean feat. It was absolutely delicious. The next slide is also a stop in India, and this is actually Mumbai. And so here's some examples of maybe ingredients that are a little bit less known. So on the top left, there's a dish called sabudana vada, and this is basically soaked tapioca balls, which are mixed with potato, ground peanuts, chili, coriander or cilantro over the pond, lemon juice. Then it's rolled into balls, deep fried, and you could just tell how delicious that was. Top right is something called a Raj Kachori. And this is like a really big puri, and a puri is like bread that is fried and then it puffs up and the middle is hollow. And it was filled with yogurt, chutneys, sprouts, chana, which is chickpeas, potato, and all these delicious crispy bits. Absolutely fantastic. Bottom left is a vada pav, and this is probably Mumbai's most iconic street food dish. Spicy potato balls coated in gram flour, which is a chickpea flour, deep fried, served in these really soft buns with a lick of hot green garlic chutney. Honestly, this is one of the best things I had in India, and I was there for 5 weeks, and it cost, I think at the time, 30 rupees for 2, which is like about 30 pence or 50 cents, something like that. And it's often referred to as the city's take on a vegetarian burger. And let me tell you, I would rather eat this than a burger most days, because it was fantastic. And then bottom right is something called misal. And this was 2 types of lentils, puffed rice, potato, fried savory bits, onions, lime, coriander, cilantro again, and topped with this spicy gravy. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, India does vegetarian plant-based food so well. These were like 2 whistle-stop examples, but there's so much more to it. Now, the next country, if we go to the next slide, that I'm going to take us to is Taiwan. Now, Taiwan they really have excellent produce, and agriculture is big there, and they grow both familiar and more exotic fruits and vegetables. And the residents of Taiwan are increasingly turning to plant-based diets and kind of foregoing meat more for lifestyle reasons. But this has resulted in more vegetarian restaurants popping up, especially in Taipei. And this was one of those restaurants, and it was called Pin Cheng. And I was given this multi-course vegetarian lunch, and I think there's like 20 dishes overall. These were just some of them. And actually 80% of the ingredients that this restaurant uses are all grown within Taiwan. But if we go to the next slide, I want to zoom in on one particular dish I had in this lunch. Now, this is called a monkey head mushroom, and it is the most meat-like, non-meat thing I have ever eaten, and it blew me away. And this it's completely unprocessed. This is just the mushroom, and it goes by a lot of other names too. And it landed on my plate like this, just this huge steak that was like dense and heavy and juicy, and it had a crust. And I honestly haven't forgotten about that dish since I had it, and this was a few years ago. So an example of where excellent produce really speaks for itself and doesn't necessarily need that much processing. Now we're going to leave Taiwan and we're going to go to China. Next slide. Now, China, like India, such a massive country, so many regional cuisines, really interesting, really varied. And I think Chinese cuisine is often associated with eating meat, which they do eat a lot of meat, but also the texture is really important in Chinese cuisine, and they're very creative, achieving interesting textures through plant-based ingredients. And one example of that is this, which is called liang fen. And what they do to make this is they boil mung bean starch in water, and then it solidifies, and then they slice it up. And in Sichuan, they serve it at room temperature, absolutely doused with like blow your face off, numbing chili oil, peanuts, coriander, bit of sugar and vinegar to balance it out. That's a picture on the top left. But in Xi'an, which is the photo I took of this woman, which has a really large Muslim community, they make it slightly differently, where they stud it with spring onions or scallions, chilies, and then they shallow fry it so the outside's really crispy and the inside's like a totally different texture. Absolutely addictive, so good. So that was a little touch on China there. And then the last country we're going to take you to is Mauritius. So we go to the next slide. And the reason I'm taking you here is because I'm half Mauritian, so I thought I should represent. But if you don't know where Mauritius is, it's a really tiny, tiny, tiny tropical island to the east of Madagascar. And Madagascar is a very large island to the east of South Africa. So it's in that part of the world, in the Indian Ocean. And Mauritians really like to eat a lot of fried snacks. And my favorite of these is probably this one, which is a taro fritter. And taro is a really interesting vegetable. It's a tropical starchy, well, it's grown for its starchy root as well as its leaves. And it's a staple root veg across Africa, Indian and Chinese cuisines. And it's really versatile, as versatile as potato. And in these fritters, so these are sweet, they grate it and then they deep fry it. And so the outside is like crunchy and slightly caramelized, and the inside is all soft and sweet, and there's like a hit of ginger in it, and they're just really good. Excellent. And then one final stop, also Mauritius, if we go to the next slide. Now this is a roti, and it is my favorite Mauritian street food. Now you get rotis in many countries across the world, but in Mauritius, the toppings that are available are either a rougaille, which is a Creole tomato-based kind of sauce, like spice sauce, curry gros, which is a butter bean or lima bean curry, quintessentially Mauritian, and a satini, which is a raw chutney, and you can either get the green one with chili and mint or the red one with tomato and chili. And my advice is, if you ever find yourself at a roti store in Mauritius and they ask you what toppings do you want, you say all of them. Then you basically roll it up into a taste bud torpedo, and it'll just blow your mind. And it's like pennies, and it's just so good, and it's on every street corner. So that was it. That was my very quick whistle-stop tour around the world in 4 countries. I hope you guys all ate before you came onto this, because I don't know about you, but I'm now starving, and there's so much more food to come. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Layla. I did not eat, and I am starving now. That all looks so delicious. Okay, well, to make us even hungrier, we're going to go over to Max now, who's going to show us how to cook something up. Go ahead, take it away, Max.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Daniel, Cool Food, and everyone and our contributors today. I've been told to bring the energy, so I'm awake, I'm alive, and I'm going to show you how you can create less food waste in your kitchen. Now, I've been plant-based for over 4 years. The first time I went plant-based and vegan was 8 years ago, fell off, and I came back on, and I'm sticking with it. But there's something, if you want to make a bigger impact, and to make a bigger impact, you have to create small changes. So if you're just thinking, oh, plant-based, and I'm gonna switch out that one dish for that those lovely meals that Layla just showed, and you're gonna make those small changes. And if you want to make an even bigger leap, look at the food that you're cooking with and the food waste that you're, I guess, tossing away. So today I'm going to make a seed to skin pumpkin hummus. Yes, I'm going to use the seeds, the skin, and nothing's going to go to waste. And then I have a can of chickpeas here, and that water that's inside the chickpea, that aquafaba, is going to go to use as well. So nothing is going to waste. And the only waste that I have, you see that? This is just the top, the stem of the pumpkin. So I'm not going to eat this, but this is not, it's going to be composted. So to begin, if you're cooking at home and you have these ingredients, run to your kitchen and start cooking with me. So I've chopped our pumpkin and I've started to remove some of the seeds, and you can use this flesh as well, the guts of the pumpkin here, and you can start to boil this in water along with the meaty part of the pumpkin too. So take the seeds as well, and before even that, you can peel your pumpkin, which I've done here. So I have the peelings of our pumpkin. You could do this with potatoes. You could do this with other types of butternut squash, and our seeds as well. And put that on a frying pan, and you can fry them up, and then you'll end up with something like this. Jenny's going, yeah. So you can make chips from the skins. And I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor, I can't tell you the value of the nutrition from these ingredients that we typically throw away, but seeds are packed full of protein. So you're looking for more protein, I'm all well and fit, and I think if you just add those seeds into a meal, you can get what you need. So the chickpea water, the aquafaba, is an ingredient that we always just toss and throw down the sink. Now, if you put it in a bowl, and you get a little bit of sugar in there, and you whip it all up. I don't know if you can see that. It becomes a fluffy texture, like a meringue. And I've used this in baking, and if you're not following me already, go on Instagram, hit the follow, and you'll see some recipes that I've used to incorporate chickpea water, aquafaba, into a cake, into brownies, into butter. I've made butter from aquafaba. I've used it in granola. I've used it in pancakes. I've used it in cupcakes and all various sweet desserts. So you can use that. So don't waste that. Again, the only thing that I'm throwing away or putting in the compost is the stem. And let me just jump into making this hummus. So I have the pumpkin here, which is so good. It's one of my favorite pumpkins to eat. I'm gonna knock that into a food processor. Maybe you can see this, maybe you won't. Let's see, let's angle that a little bit. Bear with me. Yeah. Chickpeas are gonna go in there next. I'm just gonna save my water off to the side. You can also use the chickpea water as well in making hummus as well. Chickpeas go in, olive oil. Tahini. Smoked paprika. Some lime juice. Salt and pepper, that's already in there. And you whiz this all up. Also, if you have herbs at home, I haven't bought store-bought herbs in months. And you're probably wondering, how am I doing that? Well, you can take the store-bought herbs that you have, place them in water, and in a few short weeks, you should start to see roots appear from the basil or herbs that you have. So you can do this with mint, you can do this with coriander, or what do you call it, cilantro, if you're across back in the US. And you can do this with various other herbs as well. And roots will appear. You just remove some of the leaves, keep a few on the top, and then roots will appear, place them back in soil, and there you have it. So I'm gonna add a few of the basil leaves in my hummus, and then we'll blend this all up. And again, you're left with no waste. And you're repurposing, you're upcycling, you're finding everything that would typically, go to waste. So again, the inside of the pumpkin that we usually just scoop out and throw away and toss away. Again, this is all has an impact. This all has an impact. So whether you want to use it, and you want to put it into your meals. So where's the lid? Here we go. Again, you get the gist. Hummus, and I think that's it. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4. I've done 4 recipes in a matter of, I think, 5 minutes. So there you have it.
Wow, thank you so much, Max. That was inspiring. I'm gonna go fry up some of that. I'm gonna try that with the pumpkin skin. So I'm gonna turn it over to Rob now. He's gonna talk about sustainable action in the workplace. Take it away, Rob.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm really glad to be here with everyone. Really talk about what Sodexo is doing globally and specifically in North America, the world that I represent and work in around our different businesses that we actually operate in and the clients we serve. Next slide, please. So you may have heard, Sodexo is committed to reducing our absolute carbon footprint by 34% by 2025 globally. That's aligned with the most ambitious goal of the Paris Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. And we know here in North America, 70% of our supply emissions, right, are from animal-based proteins. I think a couple of, Daniel and Jenny definitely touched on that. So to reach that target, right, that carbon reduction target, we've got to increase our plant-based purchases and reduce the animal-based purchases, as well as work with suppliers to reduce the carbon emissions associated with, foods that are more climate intense. And in order to achieve that, I've got some on the slide here. We've partnered with a lot of organizations: WWF, Humane Society, WRI, Food for Climate League, and Menus of Change as a part of the CIA. And for us in the non-commercial space, I like to call it, we've got to encourage adoption of plant-based options because our customer needs drive our menus and what we buy, right? And there's no better way to drive customer adoption than to make that crave-worthy, wonderful dish. Next slide, please. Sorry, my screen's a little slow. So I've talked at a couple of conferences around plant on the plate, right? And I used to say it's the #1 trend. It's the thing that's going on in the world. Get on board. It's not. I was wrong. It's not a trend. It's a true culture shift for anybody that grows, sells, and eats food. And we always have to start with the customer and our on-site clients that we work for. What are their needs? What are their wants? We've talked about it already, right? The days of the grilled veggie plate stashed away on the bottom under the dessert section on the menu, those are done. Plant-based dishes are what I like to call crave-worthy rock stars. They have to be. They have to be worthy of being the centerpiece of any menu, and wonderful enough for our customers to choose it over a conventional dish. Naming conventions, I think, are critical here. I've learned over the years of doing this that if you don't want to sell something, go ahead and call it vegan, or worse yet, call it healthy vegan. You're guaranteed no one's going to want to order that. Innovation doesn't always have to mean the tip of the spear stuff, though, right? From a culinary perspective, for sure, there is a sizable percentage of customers looking for that type of innovation, the really, really cool stuff. I've never met a chef that doesn't want to create really cool new stuff. But our target audience, right, the customers that may identify as flexitarians or even meat eaters, we've got to have items for them that are approachable, accessible, and appealing to them. If we have to spend precious seconds explaining what it is, we might lose them. Next slide, please. So this might be my favorite topic, Future 50. I love talking about it. And it's really our first target for Future 50 is our adults in the workplace. We partner with the World Wildlife Fund and Unilever Noor Food Solutions on this initiative. And if you haven't heard of it, the whole main idea is that 75% of our diet globally, right, comes from 12 crops and 5 animal species. And Future 50 is all about 50 other things, other ingredients that are sustainably sourced in the communities they come from. They're typically much less resource intense to grow and nutritionally very dense. And I like to tell our clients that means it's good for you and good for the environment. The list of ingredients includes things as common as red cabbage or chickpeas. We'll talk about chickpeas a little bit, or as exotic as amaranth or my new favorite, fonio. For me, this is where we really start to see the connection between what we talked about earlier, right? The whole idea of sustainable eating and climate change. Next slide, please. So I have some point of sale here for what we've done in the retail business. It really has broad application for us in the non-commercial space. We've seen really solid growth in our retail business, particularly that adult at work environment, like a corporate dining site or a hospital cafe. And these are some of the point of sales from this past spring's rollout, 100% plant-based. And I think what's really great about this is none of these are a reach, right? That accessible thing for the average consumer. People know what fried rice looks like, right? With the fried vegetables and spelt. They know what soup is, right? Yeah, it's got amaranth, chickpeas, and it's a whole lot going on there, but they know what soup is. And I can't think of anything more approachable and comforting than a good risotto, right? It's a different kind of risotto, but it's risotto, right? People can identify and understand what that looks like. Next slide, please. So I would be remiss to not talk about sustainability and sustainable eating if I didn't talk about the university's business. That's where things start, right? For us, that's where the things start to happen first. So 2 years ago, we partnered with the Humane Society here in the U.S. to create plant-based menus. We did over 300 recipes for our North American business with that keen focus on universities. We brought the Humane Society chefs into our Culinary Innovation Center. We tested the recipes. We collaborated on the training. The Humane Society right now, to this point, has trained hundreds of our chefs in the field, dozens of our sites across the country, and we're now deploying, as you can imagine with COVID, what's going on, we're deploying virtual training in partnership with the Humane Society to execute against that. And I think the dishes that I chose for this slide, they follow that same example of that idea of appealing, accessible, approachable, right? Chesapeake cakes, looks like a crab cake, not a crab cake. Tiramisu, and this one's really great, the sweet potato tamales. They're all 100% plant-based, 100% delicious, and they meet that criteria of approachable and accessible, right? I don't have to tell anybody what a tamale is, right? Or what tiramisu is. And what we've learned is it's so critical for the frontline staff, that frontline cook, to gain confidence in the ingredient use and the various techniques. Max did a great job showing some different things. Our cooks sometimes, though, taste for the first time a new ingredient and they're like, wow, that's pretty good. That gets them on board. And I think training that program, the integrated menus, the recipes, and the ingredients makes us able to activate immediately. Next slide, please. So this might be the last thing you think about when you think about sustainable eating, but it's a big deal in our senior living communities. The reality is, especially in the COVID climate, our seniors, our guests in a senior living community, they're craving variety, they're craving that experience, right? And we've been working with that group over the past couple of months to create this click and collect, click and deliver program for these communities. And it became clear as we interviewed guests and operators, there was really a strong need for plant-based options. And then, the definite reality of making this approachable, accessible, and appealing to the greatest generation, right? Bowlful, that I have the picture of here, was one of the first solutions it's deploying right now in our senior segment. We actually did a tasting on this program pre-COVID at one of our senior living communities near where I live in Virginia in the US. And I got approached after the tasting. I'm walking out of the facility, must have been 6:37 at night, and a woman approached me. She's kind of got her walker and she's coming at me. And I was like, wow, what's going on here? She didn't look happy. And she said to me just from 20 feet away, I hate garbanzo beans. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. She was at the tasting. I recognized her. And she goes, but that dish with the quinoa and the roasted chickpeas, I love it. I love that. And I was like, all right, this is great. We're really getting somewhere. Seniors really want to see this stuff. That was fantastic. Next slide, please. So what could be more important than focusing on healthy and mostly plant-based meals than in a patient dining environment? If you're a guest in a hospital, you want to eat healthy and things that are going to ensure that your food's nutrients and freshness are preserved. So we've been working with the healthcare segment on a program called Nourish over the past couple of months for exactly that purpose. I think this is my last slide, so I want to recap. My advice to anybody getting into this, make sure you've got those crave-worthy rock stars on your menus. No afterthoughts, even if you're just offering, Jenny talked about an Impossible Burger as an option to a conventional beef burger. No more vegetarian burritos, please, that are just the burritos with the meat removed. That's not crave-worthy, and it's definitely not wonderful. It's the opposite. You're actually taking something away. Be creative and innovative, and think about that from a customer's perspective. You know them. What are they looking for? I always say it's not too late to get started. Talk to your suppliers, talk to your on-site teams, and get your chefs the training they need. Your frontline staff will sell this if you help them feel good and comfortable about it. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rob. It's great, everybody. Now we're all going to have a little chat here. Okay, so I just have a few questions for all of you. I don't know why I keep doing this with my hands. I'm sorry, I can't not use my hands. But Max, I have a question for you. You mentioned, as you take a drink of water, you mentioned kind of falling off the plant-based wagon. And I wonder if you could tell us a little more about that and like how you got back on, because I'm kind of a lapsed vegetarian, flexitarian myself. So I struggle with this. How did you kind of get back on, and like, what are your tips on that?
Yeah, I grew up in a primarily or dominantly Italian French household. My parents were both great cooks. My father was a chef and grew up in his restaurant, so meat was everywhere. So it was a transition, but I was very interested in learning how to cook and eat a plant-based diet back in 2012. And if anyone remembered 2012 and like seeing plant-based options in restaurants, it was slightly unheard of. And I was living in New York City, which is like the center of the world, and there was very few options there, and it was hard and difficult and challenging. For me, it was difficult because I had to hide the fact that I was eating plants and being plant-based around my friends and family because I was afraid of being judged. So I would order a meal at a restaurant with my groups of friends, and I'd go up to the waitress or the waiter afterwards and say, actually, can you switch out that that meat option for actually the plant-based option, or can you just like put some fried veggies on the side for me? And to not live your true authentic self in that transition, because food is everything. Food makes up who we are. We are what we eat. And I didn't feel comfortable hiding that. And of course the pressure from friends and family weighed on me. And so fell off, but I was, working my way back because I felt great. My energy was up. I looked and felt great. I had a lot of energy, and I'm an athlete at heart, and I'm always running and playing sports.
Same. Yeah. And it just I recovered faster when I was eating plants, but I found worked my way towards it little by little. So my idea is making small changes creates a bigger impact. So, every couple of weeks or every day I was including more plants on my dish. And my family have always had like sustainability on their minds. My mom would yell at me, she'd pick up that plastic water bottle when I was a child. I was like, I didn't drop this. But the sustainability of turn off the lights and turn off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth, and all the things that we've been told to live more sustainably with the planet. I knew that there was something even bigger, and that's what's on your plate. Yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway for me there is bossy moms can change the world, as I am one. So I like that. Layla, tell me a little bit, I have to go right to this, about what you're eating at home right now, because we were talking a bit before about what's on your Instagram, and I was super intrigued. So tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so something cool that I ate this week because of COVID and lockdown and everything. A lot of restaurants are doing meal delivery kits, of which I have been sampling many. And this week I was sent something that was designed it's the Sustainable Restaurant Association with a chef called Tom Hunt in the UK. And he sent out this totally vegan burger in the style of a sloppy Joe, but it was pulled jackfruit that had been cooked down, and it was totally delicious. Absolutely amazing. And it had what was also cool is it had some condiments by a London-based brand called Ruby's in the Rubble, where they make their products using food that would have been wasted. So for example, their ketchup is made with surplus pears that would have been discarded because they're of the wrong shape or size or whatever for the supermarket. So you end up having more fruit in your ketchup, less added refined sugar. And their vegan mayo is made with aquafaba, which Max touched on before, which is that protein rich water that's left over, that's chickpeas are soaking in, which makes for a great egg white replacement. So it was just this really, I was just eating it. It was not only delicious, but also so inspiring. It's like, wow, you can make something so great that is totally plant-based and that appeals to so many, palates. So that was a good meal that I tried this week for sure.
Yeah, I love those. I've actually been doing a little bit of those kind of cooking boxes from restaurants as well. And I was trying back to tempeh. Today is the day of tempeh for me, I guess. But I got this really amazing homemade tempeh that I could then cook up, and they gave me all the steps, and it was just so.
They're good. They're really good. Yeah.
So good. So Rob, I have a question for you, kind of about consumers basically for any of the kind of the folks that you mentioned. Like, what could we do sort of in our workplace or at some of the facilities you talked about to kind of maybe get the message to certain places that we would like to see more plant-based options? Like, what do you recommend?
I think you just said it, right? So if a lot of my career at Sodexo was spent in the universities business, and if anyone has family member, friend, or in college or university or not too far removed from it, that they're my favorite group of customers because they'll tell you exactly what they want to see and exactly what they want, right? As folks matriculate, they get into a corporate environment, they're working at a law firm, whatever it may be, they get a little more polite and they say, oh yeah, that's fine. They might fill out a nasty comment card later, but they're not going to engage the same way. So I would say if you know, and I know it's hard right now with COVID, and we're doing a lot of takeaway and takeout, and that's a big piece of our business. Plant-based matters in that environment too, though, I have to throw in there. But when you do get back to work or you do visit one of our facilities, I always ask the question, right? If I'm there in street clothes and no one knows who I am, I ask the question, hey, what are you guys doing with sustainable eating and plant-based? What are the options today? I'm really interested in that. That sort of bottom up, right? That approach from a consumer perspective is fantastic because that's going to match the top down that we're working on with everybody on this call. I'm not going to say it's easy. I've mentioned college students, for every college student that wants to see one of those Future 50 dishes, we have 50 of them lining up for, in their minds, the best plant-based dish possible is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So, there's a rift, right, between knowledge and desire, but we're getting there. So I would say bring it up if you know the chef or the operator.
As a recovered lawyer, I know what you about those. So I have a question kind of for any of you, and that is just about kind of if you're intimidated by certain ingredients you haven't cooked with before, what are the ways to get over that? I know I love cooking at home, but as for some ingredients, it took me almost a year or even sometimes with appliances like the Instant Pot, that which is a vegetarian vegan's best friend. But I was afraid to just use it. And with certain ingredients too, what if I mess it up? What if I don't cook it the right way? I don't know. Do any of you have tips on kind of getting over that fear of just kind of staring at something, that you brought home on a whim in your pantry and actually using it? COVID's a great time to start. I will say that helped me.
A lot of cooking at home.
From a social media perspective, what I would suggest is look up a video, look up Max's stuff for how to do stuff. Yeah, if you've got some kit or ingredients that you're I really want to try something with this, but I just don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Just visually watch someone do it, and that will give you a lot of confidence, because often it's so much simpler than you've made it out to be in your head. And once you see it, you can then give it a go.
Yeah, I would say, I'd say, you know, I'm in a spot where it's a good spot that I'm in, right? If we're testing something in our innovation center, I can reach out to that manufacturer and say, how does this work? What do we do with this particular thing, whatever it is? But I would also say, I would bet my bottom dollar that every single one of those folks that make something that's out in the space, I bet they would love it if someone reached out to them, you know, and said, hey, I'm really trying to mess around with this thing. What do I do with it? I can't imagine one of these partners, like think of Impossible or anybody down the line, they would love that kind of engagement to help people understand what to do with their stuff. I really believe that.
Do it. Cook with it. Do something with it that you're comfortable. Like, go back to the basics of how do you normally cook food? Roast it, steam it, you know? I think some people, I'm sure people here, you know, on a call would definitely use the pumpkin and make a hummus like I did here, but maybe use that pumpkin if you're afraid of using it. Roast it. Go to like the basic option of cooking food. So pan fry. Find those easy ways of incorporating into your food.
Amazing. Start simply. I believe I can do it. Well, thanks to all of you. This was delicious, inspiring. Now I am starving, but I'm going to just like let the anticipation build and cook some great lunch after this. But right now I'm going to turn it back over to Daniel.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jenny. That was brilliant. And thank you for all of your contributions. I think this concept of worthy to wonderful, you showed how technology, global cuisines, innovative work with waste is coming together across all different eating environments, be that from students through to workers and the elderly as well. So thank you very much. Before we close, we have one last guest, our friend Santana Diaz, who's connected to us through our great partners on Cool Food Pledge Healthcare Without Harm. Santana is the executive chef at UC Davis Health, and he's going to be talking to us about the work happening at UC Davis, which is very inspiring and very informative, especially clearly during this period where healthcare is very prominent and important. So Santana, over to you.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you to everybody that's been on this call. And it's really about highlighting everybody's important work. And really, I'll just get right into it if we start with the first slide. Really everybody that's a part of this call and joining on this Zoom meeting is on it for a reason, whether to learn, whether to be inspired, and whether to just, what I like to be is a person of action. So UC Davis Health, we are part of the University of California system. We are backed by a university here. We are a teaching hospital campus, nationally ranked. And so ultimately, after signing on to the Cool Food Pledge, we all have kind of a shared goal with respect to all of our food service missions. We kind of simply put it together as I kind of listed one here, a mission to support great medical practices through sustainable and clean food production and service, but also something that could go simply by saying inspiring health and healing in our community through sustainable, regenerative, and nourishing food. So next slide. In the slide deck, we're going to be featuring some of the pictures of real food that we serve here, that we have served here. We stick with seasonal ingredients and what's available in our area. We are known to be in the breadbasket of California, which is Sacramento, also the capital of the state. And so what better place to do what we're trying to do, and which is introduce more whole food plant-based options, than, when we, then where else should we do it, which is why wouldn't we do it here? And so coincidentally, through the last few years, we've actually escalated and come to the top of the local and sustainable spend here within the UC system through this food program. So next slide. In continued efforts to connect with our community and create a buy-in with our staff, I can't stress it enough, is buy-in is very important. But to create that buy-in regarding our food program shift from what was the typical model, which is always based on the dollar and the cheapest, item is usually what was brought in and what was served to the masses. You know, I myself, you know, come from sports, you know, whether it be 70,000 capacity stadiums or arenas. You know, now I find myself in a venue where I can actually impart change and provide healing and healthy food options. You know, through basically through this program. So at the top left is an example of a vegan burger that we actually did for a citywide competition, which was the Vegan Burger Challenge. We did it based using carnaroli rice, which is locally sourced here. We used a risotto method, cooked that down with mushrooms. We did a roasted red pepper rui, and chilled it down, formed patties, seared it off, made our pickles, you know, preserved our tomatoes, arugula, all this. This ended up being a patient care menu option, which we actually still serve here in our hospital to date. The other one below on the bottom right of your screen is actually a real salad that we do here featuring Chioggia beets. Beets are available year round. We did add a little bit of goat cheese to that one, so it's not a whole food plant-based option, but obviously if you omit the beets, you're ready to rock and roll. And so we did feature a little bit of the persimmons, which are in season now as well. So next slide. You know, one of the things that we recommend as we all work towards this, you know, taking the climate into consideration and what the bounty of what's available around you on a local perspective, with keeping sustainability in mind of how what the carbon footprint is of getting that piece of food or that option to you, to your facility, is important. So what we were able to do is, you know, collaborate within the Department of Food and Nutrition Services here and create kind of guidelines or pillars, if you will. Here we call them evergreen goals. This helped provide direction and made sure that everything that we were bringing into the program would fit for the future, rather than, and also using our University of California Office of the President's sustainability guidelines. We really kind of looked at those and said, okay, how can we incorporate those with Healthcare Without Harm's guidelines, you know, the Cool Food Pledge, coming up with our pillars. And as we introduced new food items, as we engineered new menus, we were able to stay in line and create an actual successful program. So here, plainly shown are the fruit cups right now. We have pomegranates and mandarins available for our patient care and on a grand scale. Next slide. So, you know, we can show multiple pictures of things that we have going on, and these are mostly to provide inspiration for all of you on the call that things are possible. You know, and we do a lot of the salads, introducing, you know, the fresh fruit that's available and just presenting it in different ways. You can sear different proteins. We've done tofu, we've done a smoky brine tofu, we've grilled the tofu, we've aged the tofu, we've done just not tofu, we've done chickpea cakes, you know, risotto cakes, you know, with our carnaroli rice and things of that nature. But highlighting fruit, and the fruit and that combination of vegetables, that top salad there is something that we've done with making butternut squash ribbons, right? So just taking the butternut squash, I think it's really important. You look at a lot of the foods that we offer here, serving food in its raw state. If you serve it in its raw state, it's going to be its most nutritious and ingredient dense, you know, density, provide the ingredient density that we need for the 38 different diets that we adhere to in our healthcare operation. So just highlighting things, again, these are both seasonal right now. Butternut squash, we have mandarins on the top picture there featured in that salad. Arugula, chicories are coming about, and then we tossed it with a citrus vinaigrette. Bottom one, again, same premise. Beets are year round, so and a very nutrient dense. So next slide there. So what I wanted to show here, although these, not that I want the bar graph to scare everyone here, and it's maybe look a little bit small, but what this is showing real numbers on how we procure food. And largely what's happened here is if you look at the progression over the last 5 years, although it shows produce and meat neck and neck. That's just how we procure our food, and not a true depiction of how many vegetables we're purchasing in pounds compared to meat products or red meat, chicken, fish, and things of that nature. What's interesting is that we've been able to set those goals and those parameters with those pillars that I mentioned earlier to say, what is the goal? And so for us, our goal was trying to achieve that 50% mark by the end of this year, which we are at about 43% right now. Looking at presentation, it's so important. From that first dish that was presented there, didn't really mention it, but it was a polenta cake with a butternut squash cake that was sitting on top of a beet puree, a parsnip puree involved in there, pickled fennel, but it looked pretty. Aesthetics, we cannot get away, and we can't ignore that what we're presenting, no matter where we're at, a healthcare facility, sports facility, a school, it's got to look nice, right? Especially when people are buying it, you want them to come back and buy it again, right? So even here in this picture that we have here, the tofu tacos that we offer for our patient care now. So it's a chili lime glazed seared tofu. We have a cilantro lime vinaigrette tossed cabbage, slaw. The tortillas are sourced within, I think, 45 miles of where we reside. Corn tortillas. This is gluten-free, whole food, plant-based. Black bean purees. The black beans are from about 25 miles from us. And so anyways, taking a look at all of these opportunities and is more to try to create a model. And the model may be different for us than at different parts of the world. I understand that not every part of the world has a Mediterranean climate like we coincidentally do. But it's more to look at what are those health benefits of the menu engineering items that you're offering in your locations, and saying, where are we sourcing them from? How clean are they? And how processed are they? So everything's processed to an extent unless you're eating it in a raw form. But the reality of it is that if I cut a piece of broccoli, I'm processing that broccoli here in-house. But what we refer to as processing here in our healthcare facility with respect to food is really just doing those processes in-house. Maybe I'm just preserving it, or our team is just preserving the foods with vinegar, something simple. But one of the things that is really important to touch on or what I wanted to explain with this, is that it's possible. The progression of where we came from in 5 years, just looking at that bar graph, it shows that things are possible, right? Regardless of what anybody's mentioning of how difficult things might be. We do, an average of 6,700 meals a day. That may not seem like a lot. That may seem like a lot to others, but what it is every day. It never stops. We don't work at a stadium that has a game one day and then off for 5 days and then another game or something like that. This is every day. So the impact to our region, the community benefit of how we're investing in our community is huge, right? You've maybe noticed the icons that we are Farm to Fork. We support the Sacramento region's effort on supporting the local farmer, right? We get the community buy-in, and the result has ended up being, a lot of support for our program as well. So, we can't really say much more than, showing that it's possible. And if you have questions regarding this program that we're doing here, again, we are not trying to be siloed. We're really just trying to support and show others that there is a way to move forward with this whole food plant-based mission. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Santana. That's excellent. And thank you for your continued leadership. And, it's just seeing the change that you've achieved in a number of years is really inspiring. And, I'd like to think that, our food in healthcare in the UK could be as delicious and plant-based, because I think not only will that make stays better, but obviously, hopefully, reduce admissions as well, possibly. So just to close, I wanted to thank you all very much for joining this presentation. And I wanted to take a moment to thank all of the team at WRI that has made Cool Food Pledge and Cool Food Meals a success, to our partners at Panera, to our partners at Healthcare Without Harm, Sustainable Restaurant Association, Climate Works, a number of others on the Cool Food Pledge, to the funders, to the sponsors of this event as well, Panera and Sodexo, and lastly to our fantastic panel. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution and your leadership. So with that, I will close the panel and wish you all a great lunch that I hope will be plant-based if you're in the US, or a great dinner. Thank you very much. Bye all.